How is the weather down in Texas, Bentley?
It's pretty today. If you survive the tornadoes and the torrential rain and the 75-mile-per-hour straight line winds, knock down half the trees, then we're good now.
Details, details.
Oh, it's just been crazy over the last couple of weeks. We have a storm come in every other day for several weeks, or a week at least. Yeah, and there were trees down everywhere. It was a constant cacophony of chainsaws cleaning up the mess.
And also, they would take out power lines, which means a lot of dark houses.
Yeah, we didn't have any issues in our area. We're in a small town and they have pretty good infrastructure.
Where
Uh,
actually are you?
I'm up in the Colony, which is just northwest of Dallas.
Ah, mm-hmm.
So yeah, we even when Texas ran out of power that winter several times ago, ours came up first and our water never shut down. Because they had a local well. Then they just started it back up. Even though Dallas cut off our water without telling us, no warning, they just noticed the pressure dropped and they called up Dallas and they just said, "Oh yeah, we just shut you off. Call somebody." But yeah,
Nice
so
people.
it's a pretty good town. Any topics for Canonical Debate Lab today? It's only 1 minute after. We might have a few other people joining.
Yeah, let's maybe wait 1 or 2 minutes. I don't have anything pressing in my agenda. Did call for responded to a call for proposal with work on frames. I'm doing some work on frames in Society Library, but yeah, getting outside funding for some of the more fundamental work would be good. And we're also pitching, pitching it outside, but maybe I'll let others speak about that. So, yeah. Sunny has been pitching his latest thesis around, and he will be at a conference soon, which is good. Yeah. I'm not sure I'll have that much new to say today. I could talk about subject identity again, but I guess you people are sick of me talking about that, but I feel I'm converging on the other hand. It will feel familiar. I'm just dotting I's and crossing T's. The Okay, since anybody else has any other topic, or should I launch into that?
I don't have anything, so Sunny's gonna be back in a few minutes.
Yeah.
There's Joel.
Hello.
Hey, Joel.
Just by the way, the Slack bookmark link I think is out of date. I don't know if that was what I used last time, but I didn't notice that. But the Slack like channel message was what I used to get here.
So the mark at the top.
Yeah, the video meeting Zoom and the Hangouts channel looks like it's different than this one.
Okay.
It is. Oh, I thought I updated that.
I also thought you did. I'm pretty sure I used it last time. I don't know though for sure.
I gotta figure out where to update it. But yeah, so Joel, we were just saying we don't have a lot of big, but don't have any important topics. Mark Antoine always has something he can talk about. But before we dive into that, Joel, I'm sure you'd be happy if you have topics that you'd like to discuss, or you just seeing what's going on.
I'm kind of just seeing what's going on. I'm currently like adding notifications to my app, which is not like particularly relevant for argument, I guess, that much. It's just technical things. And I was looking at just today. I was looking at like learning more about U.S. bill passing and also like watching videos. So that was interesting to start. I was considering trying to map like a particular bill that's like currently somewhat controversial in Arizona. I saw a news article about, but I didn't get very far with that. So I guess I don't really care about talking anything from my side, but I'm here to curious about what Mark Twan has to talk about.
No. I don't have stuff. I'm just I'm working on the frames right now, and I decided to decouple the frame definition problem from the subject identity problem, topic identity problem. Because the topic identity problem is hard, but I think I'm convergent. Okay, so first, let's look at it locally. Locally, we have a term that is defined in terms of propositions which mention other terms. There can very much be circular references. That is, a term is defined in terms of another term which uses the other term definition, which need not be a problem. Actually, I think it could be a good idea. I'm not 100% on that, to even, when there's a cycle in definitions, make it explicit as a entailment mesh, because this is what it is. It's about many terms that help define one another and stand together in their semantics. That's cool. But what's important is because my basic idea is that term definitions evolve, and you refer to a term at a given moment, knowing that this is the accepted definition, and then you realize, oh, wait, it's evolved in a way that's different, and hence maybe I want to not refer to that term anymore. And so the heuristic there is to accept any evolution, assuming it's a minor edit, until somebody says, no, it's major, and let's make a fork, let's make a distinction. And because distinctions are when people are asserting the term is problematic. And the distinction, I think it's very important when we speak about evolving definition to have proposed and accepted. Now, accepted is within the community with whatever the community's heuristics or acceptance. We're not speaking about federation yet, but there's proposed evolution, accepted evolution, proposed distinction, accepted distinction. So basically, it should be easy to propose a distinction, harder to accept it because it means an update cascade. But that means most terms will, when they refer to other terms, ideally they should have name plus timestamp saying, this is the time when I last looked at the definition and it made sense at that time. And when you see that there's been proposed or accepted distinctions on that term, then you can say, well, let me look again. And no, I'm still cool with that. Or, the distinction doesn't make sense to me, or the distinction makes sense to me, and I'm taking that branch. Even if it's not adopted, it would make sense to do that preemptively.
You'd also have to look at the proposed and accepted evolutions as well.
Yeah, well, you don't have to look at the proposed. That's just if you want to be proactive.
Oh, right.
But the
accepted evolutions.
Accepted
just
is,
like you're saying. Sorry.
The accepted distinctions are what are really require your attention. See, the accepted evolution usually don't, because if it were that major, probably somebody would introduce a distinction. And that's the heuristic I'm following.
Mm.
The term is assumed to mean the same thing until somebody objects, basically.
I see. Do you
And
do you
go.
in this vision, I guess, are you assuming or suggesting that like an evolution, like say that I agreed with something at time X, and then like there's evolution 2, 3, 4. I guess the assumption is just that they're small enough that it doesn't matter until someone says, like, what if someone disagreed with evolution 2, but like they didn't come back to this and
Until much later.
realize, yeah, later,
Yeah,
then
it could happen. And this is why I'd still have the timestamp in the pointer. So you're saying, oh yeah, I was referring to version X of that term, but we're going to assume that it's probably still valid for X plus 1, X plus 2, X plus 3, unless I look carefully at it. And then if you want, you can say, okay, does this still make sense? Yeah, it's also valid for version Y. Look at that. Or no, I'm not sure. Then I'll introduce a distinction. So, but
that
you
makes
can
sense.
differ.
Yeah.
It's about avoiding update cascades. The update cascades are costly. So you want to have a heuristic saying, my concept has timestamps, and there's going to be a hash value derived from with timestamp, and that one will get updated often because every time you say, oh, I've looked at the latest version, it's still good, you're updating that hash. So you don't want to do that too often because, you know, everybody's looking at that thing. But I mean, I'm basically reducing the roles of hashes here. It's about keeping history. It's at time t, this is the version I have, and it contains pointers to these other times. And probably separately compute a hash without the timestamps. So you can say, this is tentative equivalence. If we don't look at evolution, these are probably the same concept because they have the same references to concepts. But in that case, if you do without timestamp hash and use that for, you know, likely equivalence, different equivalence relationship, then you want to be a bit more careful. But again, the beauty is if the distinction updates the terms every time, whenever a distinction is accepted, the term ends, the term name ends, and it gets replaced by, okay, here's the versions with that take into account the distinction, like case A, case B, and the abstraction, which would be separate case. So that name would be dead, and you'd know, hey, I'm using a dead term that's been replaced by a distinction, and then I know I really have to update my pointer. So that's where I'm at in that heuristic. Now, the next heuristic above that is the federation heuristic. Like we have local names and, you know, locally accepted evolution. What happens globally? My name may be equivalent to, I'm proposing that my local name is equivalent to someone else's local name. And then we can do a kind of most adopted name. Like if I have a local name, I can keep it, but I know it's equivalent to the one that is being adopted by the most communities or the communities with the most total number of members or something like that. And so if there's a kind of tree of equivalence relationship, we can say, this is the most globally adopted name, and let's use that as a point of reference. And again, it's possible that as it evolves, we'll find we're not aligned anymore, and then we'll introduce a distinction, and we'll try to introduce it globally. Or we'll hitch a ride on, well, this is a term everybody's using it in a certain sense, and as long as nobody's using a distinction, we assume that its meaning is stable enough. But it's the most popular, so there's a kind of positive feedback loop that the most popular gets the most popular, which enables, it's not about saying this is a better term, but it's about finding equivalence relation across communities. So we could translate my local definition to, here's the definition with all the most popular terms for each of the terms, the supposed equivalent most popular terms. And again, that gives us a tentative, a translated version with an equivalence relation and a tentative equivalence of higher level concepts across federation. This one is more hand wavy. There's a bit of more I's to dot and T's to cross. And again, popularity is not important as a version of truth, but it's equivalent as an arbitrary way to say, let's use this term as the translation term, which is arbitrary, but it's a way to do the translation, to create the lingua franca so we can translate. And again, at any moment, we can say, these terms are not quite equivalent, and then introduce a distinction. So this is where I'm at in the federating evolving concepts plan. And this is something, in a way, I'm bunting because I'm saying, okay, let me focus on the frames because that's simpler. But at some point, I want to be sure that I'm not totally off in my design of pointers to concepts. And I'm pretty sure that name plus timestamp is good enough, given what I'm saying. Arbitrary name plus timestamp. Arbitrary name meaning could be a UUID. It doesn't have even to be human readable, right? It's just a way of saying it's a unique reference to a concept that is expected to be somewhat stable across evolution of how it's defined.
Yeah, it seems reasonable. And the like local versus global usage of like distinction and evolution also seems reasonable with the timestamp. Yeah, I don't know if I have much to say.
So I'm not saying this is final, but this is state of that reflection. That's it. That's what I had to talk about now.
So Joel,
the evolution. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Joel, I'm also going to be setting up messages in my app. I don't know if we're talking the same type of messages, but what tech did you end up using?
So I'm actually just also the ultimate goal is just to get like emails basically. So like I added comments recently to the system, but they're not super, like I wanted to add them for the sake of like asynchronous usage of the tool. And without emails, it's not super helpful unless if people are like constantly in the app, I guess. So currently basically adding emails, but also with in-app notifications, like you just have like a list of all your notifications and why you got it, a link to the source of the comment or whatever.
You're not trying to do
not like person to person,
or just even notifications without using email or in-app.
Oh,
the actual like notifications. You know what I mean? You're not at that point yet. You know, where you get notifications on your phone or on the
like push computer. Or
push
SMS.
Notifications, yeah.
Well,
not I'm saying push, yeah. Push notifications.
Push. No, I wasn't really thinking about that too much. I did consider, like I went and looking into email. I looked at there's a service called novu.co that is like a notification infrastructure service, and they like let you, they like provide infrastructure where you can then just like turn on, oh, I want this to also work with push, SMS, email, and you can just like users can like individually toggle them on and off. But I only really care about email right now, and like I guess the main complexity that I'm envisioning for my tool is like being able to unsubscribe from specific threads or to unwatch. I'm basically mimicking GitHub where you can like watch topic and get all comments for the topic, or notifications for all comments in the topic, or you can like respond to a specific thread and then you get notifications for that thread. And the notification infrastructure service Novu didn't really have support for you could use that service and add your own stuff on top to like support that, but I figure that like
I don't think
topic
that's the notification support's job, is it? Like you decide what you want to notify the person about, and you dispatch to the notification service to actually dispatch the message. But composing the message with what the person needs to be notified about should be on your side, in my view. Maybe wrong, but I don't expect
well
a third-party service to do that for me.
I guess the service is it's not for sending notifications. It's specifically like intended as infrastructure to like you build there are like
Oh God.
subscription groups, and
Oh God, no,
like
no,
you
no,
hook
no, no, no. Okay. Yeah, that's overkill. Yeah. No, but I totally believe in the value of having an external service for sending the notification, because I maintain my own email server on my server, so I can send email notifications. It's
Oh.
hell. Setting up a
didn't-
good email server is ridiculously hard nowadays.
Oh.
I'm glad I'm doing it because I'm glad I'm not depending on someone else. But you know what? If I were doing it over, I'm not sure I'd go that route again.
Well, I was somewhat arbitrarily thinking of picking SendGrid just to send emails, just because I know it's like relatively popular and it's not like I would fit within the free tier for a while, I guess.
Cool.
And this Novu like infrastructure service, I guess, like would have to be tied to an email service anyway. Like it doesn't, like it's not responsible for specifically the sending. It
This is
is
not
for like,
something I would delegate ever.
well, I guess like the benefit of the service is that it has like designed this way of organizing who gets notifications and when. So
Oh,
you
does
don't
it
have to
handle
like
batching?
it actually, that is one of the really nice things, is that it has digest logic, like so that you can say, okay, well, these types of messages should be sent only once every day, or group them all, and send one notification for this period of time. And I think that was like, that's one of the nice things that I don't need
That is
right
nice.
now, but would have been nice. I did ultimately decide not to. I mean, I haven't like implemented it yet, but I am currently implementing my own just watches and subscriptions. Just because I didn't think it was quite worth using it, since it didn't handle the like topic level, or repo level equivalent, and subscriptions tied in with that. And yeah, it is like a cost to basically commit to using this infrastructure and assume that it's like designed reasonably and fits your use cases. So just by doing it myself, I have like full control. It's not like
Yeah,
that big of a deal.
There's
Yeah.
too much business logic. It's too application dependent. I don't see how this can be abstracted well.
Well, it seemed cool, and it's also open source, so pretty cool.
No, it is nice. It is
uh,
nice.
yeah. So ultimately, I'm just building my own, I guess, logic for watching and subscribing, unsubscribing. Uh, and one thing I would totally didn't really think about until I started looking into it was the extra complication of like making sure when people that there's like an unsubscribe button that is like specific to that user, or so that other people can't just like unsubscribe you. So it's not like a super complicated solution, but you can just, I was just going to generate a unique like identifier for each email, and then like that's how you know that it's the person that clicked on the link is like received that email, or you know, is not unsubscribing someone else from the notification, because they shouldn't be able to do that. Yeah, so
I'm gonna have to figure out mobile push and web push. But that's
is
pain in the
uh
neck.
well, when you say push, oh, actually, that reminds me, another nice thing about Novu is that it like comes with um WebSocket implementation. So like you hit their API to send it, and you can like one of the things is like, okay, users can have this notification bell that just like automatically updates when there's new notifications. Um, is that what I guess when I think of push, I'm thinking uh like on your phone, you download a mobile app and you get like a specific notification from that app.
Yeah.
So I guess like there's also the equivalent for web to have.
Yeah, for progressive web apps, they support the exact same push. I mean, it's equivalent.
Hmm.
I
So
just
that's
haven't
like
messed with it.
I've gotten notifications like on Windows 11 that just maybe say the specific app. Maybe that's the equivalent. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think most of the time, well, yeah, so there's, if you're on an app that supports it, sometimes they'll pop up something. And then if you hit yes, your browser will then ask you for confirmation, and then it'll show up in Windows.
Hmm.
And then the same in your Windows notification, then same thing for Android phones. And I think iPhones just implemented it. I don't know if it's in full production yet. So you can do it with
Hmm.
a web app now without having to have something in the App Store.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you don't have to use like a third party service to send those. You just like follow some
Yeah,
standard,
no, I
or
don't. You still need some pretty heavy infrastructure. You could do it yourself. I
hmm.
wouldn't. It's not easy.
It
Um,
has to, you mean because it has to meet some like PWA standard of like this is the way it's sent. This
well,
is
it's not the PWA portion that's the problem. It's just because the PWAs are just using the same infrastructure that apps have used for years. They just have it hooked through PWA, but the whole app notification process and keeping identity straight on who's who and getting it, because you got to get it to the infrastructure of, I don't even know where it goes through. So I don't actually know technically how the message gets to the endpoint, gets to my phone. But it has to go through some services, and those services I think are different, whether it's Apple or Android. So
hmm.
I, or it's like webhooks or something like that. But I don't think it would be easy. I think there is an open source server that you can set up to handle all that, but
Hmm.
I was looking for which services to use. And if I can't find a good one, I'll just fall back to Firestore, Google. So Novu looks like that they are an orchestrator, and then they support Firestore and OneSignal and some of the other push notification services.
Hmm.
So they support Firecloud messaging, Firebase Cloud messaging, and that'd be the one I would just use as default because I already have some Google Firebase stuff running. And
Hmm.
then there's Apple's push notification service, but I don't know if that's just called Apple because Apple's hosting it, or if you actually have how you handle the differences, if any, between Android and Apple phones. So
Hmm.
it's just a pain.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
not, it's a different type of complexity than than email, but I think it's almost not as complex, but it's at the same thing where it's easier to have someone else handle that infrastructure.
It's good to know that there's complexity there, because I guess wouldn't have. I was just assuming it's like I don't even know what I was assuming. It was just like not. It's just an API call or something, and then it's like email.send, notification dot or phone dot notification dot send.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So it's more secure than email, so it has the added complexity of they have to give you a token to be able to send to them, but then where do you send it to? Like there isn't as far as I know, there's not like, email is built into the infrastructure of the web kind of in a way that I don't think this is. So there still has to be you need a server somewhere because someone's phone isn't always online.
Oh.
Right. So if you have disconnected, then now it's messaging and queuing and
Hmm.
uh,
But it must be like the
deliverability.
phone. Wait. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
It's harder than you would think. I was
I would have
surprised
thought.
it didn't make
I
sense.
guess. Yeah, no. It makes sense now that you're explaining it. Um, I I would have thought that like the service provider maybe, or like the phones, like if it's an Android, that uh Android has this, there's like an Android server or something for all messages that goes through.
Yeah, but Android doesn't have an owner.
Well, oh, okay. If your phone is like okay, maybe it's like a Samsung
So,
Galaxy.
but it's not going through the phone companies.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
But it depends on the phone. You think it would depend on like the phone hardware or something? I I don't know. I guess what is this, an example of a service that
So Firebase
Firebase?
Cloud Messaging is one of the services that Novu supports. It's free.
Hmm.
I don't think they even talk about the infrastructure. They just say magically it works. Um, but I would be interested to know, yeah, how's the handoff happening? Who's spooling these up? Who's requesting new messages? Or is the phone saying, I'm available? Who are they asking? Who's the middle service? Or when you set up a handshake between them, maybe, you're telling the phone, here's my endpoint and here's an identity key, and then it's responsible for checking that endpoint every once in a while, or
Mm.
setting up well, it's by push, right? So it's not even polling. So the phone has to tell it the service.
Doesn't that just mean that, like, you could see a scenario where there's a TCP/IP channel and you're sending packets. It could be a UDP channel, which would make a lot of sense because it's lighter. Sorry, yeah. And then, yeah, I would do that with UDP if I were going from scratch.
Well, you still need a queuing service somewhere to handle the offline mode, right?
What I see is when the phone comes online, it says, okay, I'm online as and it has a device ID, right? Can't I broadcast a UDP to a device ID and then it either works or doesn't? So basically, when it's, it can be dropped, the packet can be dropped if the phone's not online. When the phone's online, it says, hey, I'm online. Last message I received was this one. So please resend anything since then.
That's possibly how they set it up.
Hmm.
But I wouldn't trust that something was done correctly.
No, but
I wouldn't even
the whole
assume it was done anywhere near correctly. So, hey, Carl. So
the whole
I
point
so
of
I,
that-
I don't have an opinion on. I just know it's bigger than a bread box. I've looked at it
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah,
No,
so
I'm sure it's not simple. I
and it's
agree
kind of
with you. That's the
opaque.
whole point. That's the point of UDP, right? You don't know that things are done correctly, so you need to check. There's no guarantee. That's what UDP
Yeah.
is. It's transmission without guarantee.
Hey, Carl, we're just I don't know if you've been on
Yeah,
for a while.
we got technical because we didn't have enough pure CDL topics. I gave a bit of update, but nothing that fundamentally new. Do you have CDL topics?
Not really. I've been kind of in a un-CDL phase. Yeah.
Are you folks following what Felix is doing?
No.
Yeah.
Last I heard, he was working on Hacker News algorithm thing.
Okay, this is worth me getting into it. Frankly, we should invite him next time. Dave worked on something called the global brain algorithm. And let me speak in their place a bit. Social protocols. We're building Jabber social media for the future. Documentation. Yeah. So this is the GitHub for global brain. No, that's not the one I want. Sorry. Looking for the global brain JL. Yes, that one. Put it in the and there's there's a link to the global brain algorithm. That's right there. So basically what they have, and it's absolutely worthy of attention, is a protocol so that if you have a Reddit-like things with upvotes, threaded conversations, upvotes, and downvotes, the question is, what are the most important contributions? And the idea is people who vote on a top-level idea. It might be a top-level post. It might be informed or uninformed. They might have voted with or without knowing what's up. But the idea is if the people have voted to responses, well, presumably they've read those responses, so they're better informed. So you can kind of extrapolate and say, this is the people who haven't voted on on responses are the uninformed voters, and people who have voted on down responses are the informed voters. You can kind of extrapolate what would be the informed consensus. And then you can look at what are the contributions that correlate the best with the informed consensus and that presumably drive people towards the informed consensus. So the idea is to have a measure of the information value of this response by saying it is driving people towards the informed consensus or away. So anyway, you have a measure of this information. It's valuable if it drives people towards the informed consensus, and it's anti-valuable otherwise if it drives them away from the informed consensus. So you can measure the value in a very interesting way of each contribution. So that's what they're doing, essentially. So that's the short version. We could go more into the details, but
Does it take into account like when votes are cast
it
on?
does. Yes. There's a lot of details, like especially if you change your vote, that's more information. But it's trying to be minimal about, it has to make assumptions about, if, like, for example, I've been saying, oh, it would be nice to know when somebody's read a response, even if they haven't voted on it, and they're not doing that yet.
That seems kind of hard because, like, well, at least when I'm on like Hacker News, you scroll. How do you know if I've actually read it or just ignored it? I guess when I scroll past it, I at least look at it, but might I don't know, it's like
There's now actually even is it a CSS, but at least a JavaScript, but maybe it's even CSS. There's a new JavaScript thing, so you can ask, how long has this
been in the viewport or
H
something.
fragment, yeah, been in the viewport? So you can make an assumption that, the person scrolled very fast, probably wasn't read, depending on the length. You can make those calculations now, which is extremely important and interesting, I think, if you're trying to understand these kinds of things.
Hmm.
Knowing what
Interesting.
people have read is hugely interesting. But they're working right now on doing their own social network so that they can control for that stuff.
Oh,
And that they can say, well, this is what we're showing you, and we're showing you this one and not this one, to do kind of A/B experiments and seeing how it affects things. But
did
they're
they?
also, yeah,
It's not something that they could just apply the algorithm to Hacker News or something if they
they're
have
doing
all
that
the
too. They're doing that too, but they'd get better information if they control the experience.
I guess if you're just like building something on top of Hacker News, you can't really evaluate like the result of, I don't know, bringing the informative information to the top or something, because people are mostly using Hacker News and not whatever your interface is.
And you don't know about reading, though I don't know if that's in their scope. But anyway.
Oh, right.
But really, really interesting, the idea that you can measure the value of something by how much it brings you towards informed consensus.
Yeah, I haven't heard of this concept, and it does sound very useful. Especially like, well, just the idea of like a vote's like significance changing based on if that same user has voted on other things. Or I guess like not even just that, but just like if they've read other things, and then I guess you could use voting to signify that they've read it. But
Which is what they're doing now, yeah. And it makes sense. Informed consensus is worth more than uninformed opinion. Informed opinion is worth more than uninformed opinion. And their algorithm, by the way, is recursive in that if you've voted like sub response, that means you presumably read the thread, and it also helps assess a lot of other things. And then they can also tell, oh, you voted on this thing, and most people who voted, say, positively on this thing ended up voting negatively on the top level, and you didn't, so you want to change your vote, because it looks inconsistent with how people are doing it. So these are the kinds of things you can ask with their framework. Really amazing technology.
do you know if they've started? I guess I'm just briefly looking at this repo. Is it actually a UI yet? Or are they working on a UI for this?
They're working on a UI.
Like,
this is the algo, really. This is truly the algorithm.
right.
But they are working on the UI also. See, if you look in the social protocols stuff, they will say, oh, we're working on the Jabble social media from the future. Follow our process. Blah, blah, blah. So there's another repo which is
Oh,
yeah,
Jab.
it's Carl already posted it. I'm too late.
Oh, I see. So does it actually have a way of signifying if you've like acknowledge a post but don't necessarily want to upvote or downvote it?
Not at this point,
Maybe
that
that
I
just
know
doesn't
of.
make, I don't know if that,
No, it does make sense.
uh,
It should be. I don't think their algorithm handles that case well yet, but I may be wrong again. Here I'm not them. I'm not on their team. I just keep abreast because I think it's extremely interesting.
mhm.
The worst thing about AI is how human-like it is. I ask a
What?
question, and just like most people, they answer something close to what I asked, but not exactly what I asked. It's just annoying.
Hmm.
I'm trying to get this technical stuff, and I'm like, okay, so in this specific scenario, and they answer a scenario that's really close. God damn it. It's just like talking to a very low-level tech support person. And the one thing I liked about computers is that they tend to be rather detailed. So
Hmm.
it's like, did I ask that? No, I didn't ask that. Read what I asked, try again. It usually gets it right on the second try without changing the prompt.
You remember Dwim?
Hmm?
You remember Dwim?
Mm-mm.
Dwim was actually a command, do what I mean. It
Oh.
was on old list machines where
no.
if you made a silly typo, you would type Dwim and it would kind of infer what you were likely to have meant to type and would do it. To try to correct the input.
Hmm.
Mark Anton, what do you think about there being just a single critical thread in Jabal?
I think it's perfect. Their algorithm is about identifying the most critical thread. There could be more than one. I think the idea is, let me direct you to the single most critical thread, but there will be a kind of A/B testing to sometimes show you other threads and see how you react to that one to make sure that you're not in a total positive feedback loop, as I understand it again. Now, of course, there should be a view where you see all the threads, but it makes perfect sense even then to have the threads somewhat ordered by criticality. Now, of course, there should be, and which they had in their Hacker News algorithm, something that will sometimes elevate a thread about which not enough information exists to gather information.
Oh,
Hmm.
together.
That's the kind of thing that they very much think about in general.
But couldn't that be like a question or a thread that's just like started with a question and people still like upvote it based on like this seems important?
Yeah, well, that's if it's upvoted, it's important. The idea is they have decided not to care about the structured information thing that we normally care about, which is, is it a question? Is it argument? Yada, yada. They're not going
Mhm.
there. It's just, this is adding information. This is driving information in a certain way. So it's probably significant for that reason.
Carl, I'm curious about this one critical thread concept. I guess in my head, like in art, if there's an article and then there's like different aspects of the article and people usually comment on specific aspects. So like how, if you had one critical thread, would that just mean that like all aspects are in that thread, not like they're all like relevant? It seems to imply that like you have to have a root comment that is like, I don't know, at least welcoming to all aspects to talk about in the children or replies, I guess.
Hell, I think they're, at least I'm Mark Antoine's going to have probably better info than me, but just looking at their UI from that those screenshots from that link, the Javel repository, it seems like they're saying take Reddit or Hacker News, like a threaded comment system, but then add in this concept of like a single critical thread, although with Mark Antoine's caveat that they may find ways to sort of move in and out things to sort of double check, is this the critical thread? So like I imagine there's threading going on behind the scenes. I don't see that in the screenshots, but then they have this single like linear thread of like this appears to be the most important series of things you need to see to come to a informed conclusion on the topmost thing. And so that was a long way of saying I don't think they're looking specifically at particular articles or fact checking claims. That it's more around like what did the person say initially, whatever that's going to be. People are gonna have to make their own decisions around what was implied by this initial comment. Whatever. And same way in Reddit. I don't know if you're a frequent Redditor or maybe a past Redditor more like me, but there was always that anticipation of going from the link to the comment side, and then you're expecting to see maybe that either in like the top comment or the second to top comment, like something like they're going to comment on this thing, and then oftentimes the top voted comments will be sort of this thread of like important replies to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're just trying to make that a more what's what I'm looking for, like more formally define that with like an information sort of background. That's how I'm looking at it.
Or maybe more consistently arriving at that thread. Or maybe like if you just rely on purely.
I think let's make it a point to invite them next time.
Yeah.
I'm being called on some other fires, so respectfully bow out and enjoy and all the best, and
cheers.
See you next month.
Yeah.
Ciao, ciao.
Thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.
Actually wasn't listening. So are we done?
Oh, well, yeah, I don't know. I was gonna kind of keep looking at this repo, just the README, the landing part, and anything occurred to me, speak out, but
yeah, I was also just kind of scrolling through because I actually, when I was scrolling through it, I wasn't really reading it super closely. I was just looking at the pictures, and I was assuming that it was more. I think what you're saying makes sense now, but I had initially assumed it was just like basically Reddit, but the scoring brings things to the top differently. But this is like the critical thread, critical reply is like a formal thing they're defining, it looks like.
yeah, it seems like it's sort of like a separate UI concept. I mean, maybe integrated, like maybe you can easily see or the threads, or maybe it's I don't know how the threads and the critical thread interplay, but
I wonder if it talks in here about like intentionally duplicating comments in reply to like the critical thread once you realize that like that's the critical thread.
is that a type of gaming to try and become the critical thread, or what would the duplicate?
Because it looks like everybody's routed to the critical thread to make sure they read all these things. So then I guess maybe the critical thread doesn't ever include non-critical things. Yeah, it probably makes it. I was assuming that if they're at the bottom of the critical thread, then like when someone replies to that, then that's like where people would look first for other information, I guess. But maybe it just gets if they had a reply elsewhere, if it was upvoted enough, maybe it would just get like into that thread somehow automatically. Or maybe it wouldn't, because then it wouldn't really, you lose the context of like you're replying to a parent, or you're like you're replying in the context of a parent.
I lost you. What was it?
Just like if so there's like one critical thread, right? If it's already established, but you have something to say that's like maybe you said it at the same time as the critical thread was being established, and or it wasn't like established yet, and your thing is also important. Then like if they're only showing this critical thread, like you can't really just, even though your thing's important, it's like awkward to try and append your thing into that critical thread because like it's not really within the context of that thing. Or I based on this, it seems like it's, you have the critical thread and the replies to the replies to the replies to see like the chain. But if your comment doesn't make sense within that, like what happens? And like what if that becomes more important than, well, not necessarily what happens, but like assuming you don't automatically like put that into the critical thread, then like people might be motivated or it seems like you'd be motivated to put your comment as a reply in there somewhere, just to give it a chance to become critical. Because otherwise it'd have to have like more criticality than like everything in the thread to have like a new critical thread or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to play it all out in my head. I mean, one thing it's not directly responding to you because I think you're making a good point. I've noticed, you see this frequently in Reddit where people will edit their replies to sort of incorporate new information. So I wonder if
Oh.
that's maybe what would happen or something they're thinking. Like I agree with you. Like the person would probably they'd be like, oh, don't miss my parallel contribution, which is also important. They do that as a reply to the thing that was critical, and then possibly that author, incorporates it into their thread, or maybe not. Yeah, I mean that's an interesting. I guess so. I guess maybe one way to take that the next step is can two threads be critical not because they changed people's minds, but because they both positively contributed to changing minds on the thing that they're in reply to.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. And maybe we can ask them that if they come. Still trying to understand exactly how you become critical. Is it because you changed your mind on the initial thread, or because you changed your mind on something in the chain? I guess that would be another question for them.
Yeah, how they calculate if people are more likely or less likely to vote on something.
All right, I got to reread what
Oh.
Bayes' truth theorem is. I saw that at one point and I forgot what it means. But maybe that's something else I could explain. Because my next
what?
question, so I was, as you're reading this, you're kind of like, okay, but what about gaming? Because if a person realizes this is how things are done, then they can just follow the critical thread, vote, I think, however they want on the critical thread parts, and then vote how they would like the score to go for the top thing. So it's like it's gaming the system, right? Where because you've read the repo or whatever, that by voting below, your vote counts as an informed vote, so it counts more. So you vote below, just maybe it doesn't even matter how you vote, you just click, and then you vote on the top thing, doing like expressive voting, where you're not really voting according to like logic or, your real analysis. You're voting because of your feelings. You don't like this political candidate, or you don't like what you think the person is implying. So you vote down or you vote up or whatever the case may be, or, you like it and you do vote up. But
Right.
but they have something on that in that same repo readme, reputation and reasonableness.
Mm,
But it says it's using an ingenious scoring mechanism.
the Bayesian truth serum.
Yeah,
Oh, I see.
around
I
myself.
think the concept is they're only scoring the things that the people did not vote on. So you can't really game the system because you're voting the way you want to vote, and that's taken into account in order to calculate what people would have said on the things they didn't vote on for the people that didn't vote using statistics. But that's just memory from like 6 months ago. So
That's the summary of Bayesian truth serum.
no, it's the summary of what they were trying to accomplish with their Reddit example. I don't know that term. They weren't using that term at that time. So I think that they might be using that term for that. But as far as your question about gaming, you can't game it because you're voting on the things you're voting on. And it's only calculating the things you didn't vote on.
Hmm.
Regardless of why you liked it. But I could be wrong about that. It's probably easier to, we're already at an hour, so it might be easier just to let them explain. I think they did do some videos on it on an earlier pass. So if you're really curious, you might look for those. I think even at CDL, although I'm sure they've made some advances since then, it probably would just have them back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, if you come across the videos, otherwise if I come across them, I'll share them. It's definitely interesting.
Mhm. Sounds good to me.
Okay. Well, I can go ahead. This is my Zoom account, so I'll probably shut down the whole meeting unless y'all object.
No, sorry for showing up late. I was putting out my own fires this morning and
Yeah.
joined.
All right.
All right. Talk to you later.
All right. See ya.